right, we welcome everyone to our workshop here. We are going to hear some budget presentations from our Fairgrounds, Senior Center, Human Resources, and Fire District, and we welcome you all here. Thanks for being here. All right, let's get going then. Bart?
Come on up, Bart. Come on up. Always good to see you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
You're even dressed appropriate. Look sharp.
Hey, thanks. So I haven't watched any of these, so I don't really know what you're after. My budget is probably pretty flat from what it has been. I do have some increases. I anticipate some increases in fuel costs, and I have some increases, known increases in Logan City utilities. But other than that, my budget is pretty flat. There is a big decrease on one of the lines that you'll see in the 640, which was miscellaneous services. I had been putting some things in that line that covered fire extinguisher inspections and pest control and a whole bunch of other miscellaneous services. We've since taken that out and put that into the 260 line. So that absorbed all of those expenses into the 260 line. But one area I noticed that was, whether it was me or when this happened on the 280 communications, that request should actually be 20,000, not 28,600. To keep that in line with what it has been historically. So, but other than that, does the council have any questions?
Council, any questions for Bart here?
Bart, the only question I'd have, because you always do a great job and keep us up to date, get things out early, plenty of time. How do you determine what line item to put expenditures in?
So that's kind of tough. If it has to do with buildings and grounds, there's a lot of things. There could be crossover in several things. Mm-hmm. You know, some things are pretty cut and dry. Software, computer stuff is pretty cut and dried. Office expenses are, you know, if it's something to do with the event center, it's happening in the front office. There's a few things. If we're buying paper clips or paper, things like that, that's pretty obvious. The areas where it gets a little harder to differentiate might be between equipment, supplies and maintenance, and buildings and grounds. And, you know, that's just, you kind of look at what it benefits the most, and that's where it goes.
Okay.
So 260, all the stuff that come from the 620 miscellaneous services into primarily 260 are all maintenance related items. So, you know, that was kind of an appropriate fit to move all that stuff into there.
But you do put some thought into that.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions for Bart? Okay.
Okay. Thank you
Bart,
for your time tonight.
Appreciate your, yes.
I'm kind of curious, I know there's some talk about renovating and upgrading some of the facilities, especially in the arena area, seating, things like that. Or is that still
So
in the air, just getting plan stage still? Or?
I anticipate within the next month or two, probably maybe even the first month of next year, bringing in the master plan that we've been working on, and that addresses some of that.
Nothing within this 2023 budget, though?
No. Wrap stuff, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Wrap stuff, you know, we'll certainly apply for more money for the restroom that we anticipate building there on the north end of the park. Yeah, it's all wraps. Any of that capital stuff, we're really looking at wraps right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Just keep it in the forefront.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bart. All right. Senior Citizen Center. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, and I apologize. I have to wear this yucky mask. I'm battling a nasty cold. I do want to recognize Carolyn Reed from the Area Agency on Aging. She is the
Hi.
director, and she is here today with us.
Great.
We went in contract with the Area Agency on Aging back in 1973, so we receive our federal funding and state funding through that department. To begin, the senior center, as of this morning, I looked at registered users, and we have 1,631 registered users participating at the center, coming for different needs, other resources as well, anywhere from education, exercise, and nutrition, and Medicare counseling. To break it up a little bit, just so you guys are kind of aware, people living in Logan City, we have 790 participants, and in Cache County, 841 outside of Logan City. So that percentages for Logan City is 48.4%, and Cache County participants are 51.6%. Inflation for us, starting off with my 4970 account, which is the nutrition account. Inflation has really affected our budget there in that food costs. It's gone up 44%. In our expenditures, we've gone up 35.29%, and what's affecting that is our wages and supplies and other services. In our supplies and other services, historically in 255, we used to have that grant from United Way, so we had them separated. United Way paid for the packaging of Meals on Wheels, which would just be either the 2-hole or the 3-hole compartments. Boxes, but now we no longer receive that grant, so I've consolidated both supplies. So we have our 2-ounce containers, 4-ounce containers, lids, gloves, everything that goes into the bowls, soup bowls, something that United Way wasn't paying for before out of that grant. So we've consolidated into that account. So we're no longer receiving those funds from there, but in 240 there's been an increase of 36.3%. And in that line, we try to hold a volunteer appreciation dinner every year, and so we've kind of increased that a little bit to put up the cost for that for the services. Usually we try to find anywhere from $12 to $15 per plate to be able to say thank you to the volunteers that we receive that donate to our center. Last year, looking at it, we were looking at a little over $100,000 in-kind dollars that we received from the volunteers in their time in helping with Meals on Wheels. As I mentioned, our food vendors, both Nicholas and US Foods, those are $49.70, $3.82, and $3.83. Both of those were going to have a 44% increase. We've looked at the menu, we've taken it apart as many times as we can, tried to provide more soup days to try to offset, maybe do some more casseroles, but it just is what it is, and we've just tried everything we can in that sense. Our per plate has increased as well. Last year, it came out at $171 per plate, just food costs. That isn't including utilities and wages. That's just the food cost alone. And right now, as of this end of September, we are at $205 per plate. So we've seen that 34% increase, but we're still staying at that 200% average. 200 people average. And that's the question I have for the council. With the goal of the Older Americans Act, it's to try to serve all older adults, whoever needs the services. But in order for us to stay at that budget, I really try to stay at that 200 per person average. But we know that need is there. And so what we've done to try to make it at the 200 is we do 160 for Meals on Wheels and about 40 average for congregate people coming to the center. But where we're seeing that increase is Meals on Wheels. And as our population is aging and needing the services, that's where we're filling it. And so I didn't include it for next year, but I just want to make the council aware of that is coming. Just because of all the increase, I didn't want to increase it even more with that, but I think we're going to be looking maybe at about a 230, 250 average so that we can get those Meals on Wheels clients. Right now, we have a wait list of about 20 clients, because if we can't take them on, if not, it affects the budget. And it's difficult, and it's hard to turn people away, but our budget is our budget. And so I just wanted to make you guys aware of that and the services and the need that is increasing there. In our expenditures for 4971, we've had a 25% increase in that. 18% of that came from personnel, but we're asking for $32,000 in minor equipment and maintenance. And that's just for our fuel, for our vehicles, for the Jeeps, the Meals on Wheels trucks, for the four trucks and our bus. We would like to install some LED lighting in the cafeteria. And then in the office, one of the offices in the hallway, if you guys remember, it's a very small office. And the furniture in there is an outdated, very big, bulky furniture. And so she's not able to visit with Medicare clients. They're not able to actually access her office if they're in a wheelchair. So we want to look for some furniture that can be a little bit more efficient, a little bit smaller, so that we can address that and be able to meet the needs of the client. In our 4974, we've had a 16.8 increase, 16% coming from the personnel from wages, but 28% coming from supplies and other services. That's going to be from our office supplies, team training meetings that we've been having, and then also we've had a 42% increase in communication. And that's our phone and internet, which is something we can't really control either. Is there any questions that you guys have?
I have
Yes.
one question. So you lost a grant from the United Way.
We did.
How much was that roughly?
It
annually?
just depended every year, depending on how much donations they received, but it was anywhere from 12 to 15,000, depending on the year.
And did they just eliminate that grant, or what was the?
I think they've gone a different way in how they're running their funding, and they're no longer giving that money to nonprofits. They're not doing like they used to.
Okay.
Yeah, okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, very good. All right. Amy, please come up. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. First of all, I'm hoping that you've all had a chance to look over the HR budget, and I would like to entertain any questions that you had before diving right in. So.
I've looked it over. I didn't have any questions. Anybody?
Great. I think one of the things I wanted to just let you know is that you'll see that some of the things increased significantly, but the budget's dollars are small. That's because we are a small department of 3. One of the biggest things, and we talked about this at the last council meeting, is with the subscriptions and memberships and education and training, that has increased due to the certification for the Society of Human Resource Management for Angie and Casey that they were able to accomplish. And I'm so proud of them for doing that. That's not an easy feat. And it also comes along with continuing education credits that need to be kept up with annually. And so that's where you'll see the increase there for that. And then also in our communications, that's increased a bit because they have been using their own personal cell phones for county business and need to be reimbursed for that with a stipend. So that's where you'll see most of that. And then the other big increase that you will probably see is in that employee safety program. Currently, we're doing a safety incentive that is given to about half of our employees. And the parameters that we've used for that is if you're driving 25% of your job, then you would be eligible for the employee incentive or the safety incentive. And the reason for that is this is something that came from the Utah Local Governments Trust. And it's a program that they've put in place to help keep our accidents and incidents down. And it's amazing when you put people on a team and they have to all be safe for the month, and just one small $10 amount, how much they rally around each other and make sure that each other is safe. So not only do I think that only half of our employees should have that, but all of our employees should be focusing on safety. And so with that, the Risk Management Committee and I are working on different types of safety things that even employees who aren't driving 25% of their time will be able to have a goal to reach and be able to receive that $10 safety award as well. So in the long run, that will keep all of our insurance premiums down as far as our property liability, things like that. So that's where you'll see the increase there.
Does that include like if they're driving to work or driving home or?
No, well, if they're in a county vehicle, then yes.
Yeah, okay,
But if they're driving their own personal vehicle, then they wouldn't be
yeah.
dinged for that, I guess. But if there was an accident that was non-preventable that they were in, then they and their whole entire team would not receive the safety incentive for that month. So,
Very good. Any questions for Amy? Awesome job. Thanks,
Thank you.
Amy. Thank you. All right. Rod from the Fire District.
Be like, Amy, any questions? No. So, just so you're aware, and I'm going to explain a little more at council meeting, but we operate the county ambulance station in Hiram.
Okay.
We have 9 full-time personnel there and 6 part-time slots. But that's shift work, and so somebody needs to be there all the time. So if somebody takes a day off, they have to be backfilled with somebody else. It's not like a normal office where if somebody takes a day off, then nobody has to fill that job while they're gone. So we end up with some extra expenses for that. We also operate a paid-on-call department out of Wellsville. So our ambulance in Wellsville is Wellsville First Responders. We pay them pager pay at $1.75 an hour for 2 people to be on call at all times, 24 hours a day. And when they go on a call, then they go on the clock at their rate. And then we have in Mendon, we have from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, you have 1 full-time person there and 1 part-time person. And that part-time person comes from the Mendon Fire and First Responder staff. So all in all, we have 15 full-time employees, including our management staff, 13 part-time that work strictly out of the ambulance station, 14 in Wellsville, 8 in Mendon, and then the first responders in Nibley are also under our budget. So that's, again, payroll is always going to be the biggest chunk of the budget, and that's what accounts for that. In our first budget, the 4220, the municipal services, that is contracts that we pay other cities for fire suppression for the unincorporated county. We're projecting about a 6% increase in that budget. And that's formulaic. It's based on how many people live there, and with the census coming out with newer data, we've seen growth. So number of people will affect how much we pay, and there's some distribution as it's averaged out based on what their own budgets are. So that's the increase in that 4220 line. In the overall fire budget, we have 2 budgets, fire and ambulance. And to your question, how do you decide which goes to where? When I look at an expense, I say, if I didn't have ambulance, would I have to pay this expense? And if it's yes, it goes in the fire side, and if it's no, it either goes in the ambulance side or we balance it out. So for instance, fuel on vehicles, I know what fuel goes to what vehicle, and I can say, okay, these are fire vehicles and these are ambulance vehicles, and so I can split those so that they're reflected in those separate budgets. And it's a fairly accurate way to do it. Our personnel is broken up. Generally, they're 80% ambulance, 20% fire, strictly based on a call percentage, how often they would do fire versus ambulance. My administrative staff is split between the two. I'm 50-50. Our EMS chief is 80% ambulance, 20% fire. So we just try to look at their duties and how much time they spend on those duties to split those 2 budgets. This year, I'm requesting money to promote 2 existing personnel, not hire replacements or anything, but promote their position to a captain position. And what that is kind of the daily supervisor within the station itself, so that there's somebody responsible for all the duties and managing that station while they're on shift. It's common and typical for fire departments to have a captain supervise that station. Right now, we have one captain position that's been filled previously, and I'm asking for money to promote 2 more to that position. There is an increase in our personnel payroll budget due to, in part, the 8% COLA. The other part is an increase in overtime and part-time pay and this is just based on actuals from this year. We've tried to carefully watch our overall budget, and we dropped 1 fire engine from next year. We're getting stacked up because we can't get them, and then they're carrying over, and so we're pushing that out. So that drops 1, which would net a 12% decrease in the fire budget, including that capital. And then on the ambulance side, with what we have going on there, it'd be about an 8% increase in the ambulance budget with the personnel.
On the promotions to captain, they will have the same duties, it's just they're getting a different title, or do you need to replace some of those duties with a part-time or anything like that?
I don't need to replace any of the duties with part-time. I need to put more supervisory responsibility on the ones that are there because nobody's doing it currently. Okay. When we look at run reports and who's reading those and making sure they're accurate, making sure that their time is managed better as far as their daily duties. I mean, when you're sitting at a station waiting for a call, there's some downtime. Is anybody there that's going to manage their training time and making sure that all that's getting done in place? And if nobody's in that station for that period, then the supervision lacks a little bit, and that will tighten that up. We'll see some more effective use of time.
Great.
In the event of wildfires, because most of them are going to start on federal land around us probably, and we're going to, how does that work from a budgetary standpoint?
That's a good question. We have, there's agreements in place through the state, and so if a fire occurs on federal land, then the departments that respond are paid at a specific rate for the time they spend on that fire. So this year we sent an engine out 2 times, one time to Arizona and one time to California, and they paid us for that. It generated about $100,000 in revenue with probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 40% cost. So we netted about $60,000 off of that deployment. But locally, anything that burns on federal, it's their responsibility, they pay for it. If it burns on unincorporated county, we're responsible and we pay for that. And part of that is through these contracts in that first budget I mentioned. But anything in the urban interface, wildland area that's unincorporated county, we end up paying for. Fortunately, this year we had no expenses for those fires.
So if it starts in incorporated county, burns into federal land, we're on the hook for?
There's a cost share agreement, and it's typically based on area of the fire. So whoever, proportional, if it burns 40% on unincorporated and 60% on federal, the feds pay for 60% of the fire. Now, fortunately, there's also an agreement with the state that once it becomes delegated, meaning the state sends resources, especially air resources, then those costs are paid by the state. It's put against our 10-year average, and that 10-year average is what we have to spend in mitigation. So it's locally spent money. Even though we don't pay the fire expense, we pay that average and we apply it locally for fuels mitigation and fire prevention. Okay. It's a really good system for the counties. I don't know how much longer the state's going to carry it.
I was interested, you told us in our fire board meeting that the fire that started up Sardine Canyon was either on state or federal land and then spread into one or the other. So how did that get billed? I imagine we had people there helping, didn't we?
No, we had a lot of people there helping. Part of them got paid. The guys that were fighting the fire got paid. Some of the overhead, like the management staff, may not have. It was on a Sunday, I think. So it started on state land, state right-of-way, burned into Wellsville City property, and then burned into federal property. So state's responsible for part, Wellsville City's responsible for part, federal is responsible for part. Wellsville City's also in this program, where it affects their 10-year average rather than having to pay directly for those expenses. So even though there were aircraft on scene for multiple days, nobody gets a bill, but their suppression and mitigation responsibility will increase slightly.
So much of it would have been paid by the state and maybe the federal?
Yeah, I think city actually was the biggest part of that. But because it became delegated, then it goes to this other program. And it used to be that they would have to pay dollar-wise. They would have to pay for that. And like the last time the Millville face burned, a chunk of that was, I think $190,000 of that was county responsibility that we had to pay. And the other $6 million was federal and state. So now with this new system that's been in effect for 4 or 5 years, it just affects your 10-year average. And with our mitigation and with our prevention efforts, we've brought that from $55,000 a year down to, I think, $35,000 this year. So we've been really good at watching our money on those wildfires.
Excellent.
Well, thanks, Chief. I think that's gonna be a bigger and bigger issue for us, so.
Yeah, it's funny. The last 2 years, I would have expected a lot more, but I think our yelling on the radio and people paying attention has really helped. So.
Good. Good job. Thank you, Ron.
Thanks.
Okay. Wow, that was fast.
Let's do that again
Let's
in
do
a couple hours.
Okay.
We challenge you.
All right.
You can repeat.
All right, if there's nothing else to talk about, then we will